It won't take real long to go through this material. There's 3 or 4 things I want to hit, really emphasize to you today. Places we see a lot of problems. This is the list of what we're talking about primarily. But before we start talking about these things, I want to tell you a little information. We have all different types of cities, big, little, north, south, east, and west, and we also have a lot of different types of municipal governments. How many of y'all are here from code charter towns? Most of y'all probably are. Code charter, we have mayor council, we have council manager, we have commission, we have several that are special charters. This class is designed to be pretty general, so regardless of the type of municipal government your city has, this information is going to be the same. There may be 1 or 2 little times it varies a little. And I will tell you too, some of these things, most of them come right out of state law. Some of these things I want to talk about are things that you have to do as a council, as a board, to have regulations and policies and procedures for your city. Every city doesn't follow state law the same way. What do I mean by that? Well, is anybody here from Natchez? Natchez was a city before Mississippi was a state. There was no state law when Natchez chartered in 1799. So when we go to Natchez to look at any financial information and the rules about it, sometimes we have to read the city charter to see what their rules are. So it'll vary a lot from place to place depending on the type of government and things of that nature. But most of what we talk about today is going to be the same for everybody. And if it's not, I'll try to point that out. We're going to talk about your official oath of office and surety bonds, official duties and faithful performance. It's a tongue twister. How to know your duties and avoid liability. This is where it gets important for you personally, avoiding liability. How to tell when expenditures are legal, and then a little bit about the state auditor's investigative duties, and a little bit about the municipal compliance questionnaire. The first thing I'll tell you is this: the state auditor does not audit any cities, not a one. We're not legally authorized to do audits of municipalities. The law says that CPA firms audit municipalities. There have been laws changed over the years to affect what kinds of audits municipalities can have. Little bitty small municipalities can fill out a certified form that's filled out by the city clerk and signed by the alderman that comes to the state auditor's office in lieu of doing an audit. Do y'all know if any of your towns are doing those? It's designed to be a cost savings. I'll never forget one year at this very conference, a mayor came up to me, and this was back when every city had to have the same gap CPA audit done. And the mayor told me our entire city budget is $52,000, and I just had to pay $9,000 for an audit. Well, think about that a minute. That's almost a quarter of the whole city budget going for an audit. Now, I'm not saying audits aren't important. They're very important, but is it worth 1/4 of your budget? So we got involved with the legislature years ago and tried to make some common sense, which is a hard thing to do in government, some common sense changes. So there's different levels of auditing required now depending on populations of the cities. So all that being said, though, we're still not the ones that do the audit, but we make the rules under which they are done. And we have a lot to do with rules about how things are done in cities. That's why we're talking to you today. First thing we'll go to is your official oath. First thing you do when you're elected to office or appointed to an office, if it applies, is you have to file an official oath with the clerk. And you put your hand up, you state the oath. If y'all do a swearing in ceremony, this is the oath you take. It's in the Mississippi Constitution. And the language is on the slide. I'm not just going to read it to you, but this is the oath of office everybody has to take before they can perform any official actions as a mayor, alderman, councilman, whatever, police chief, city clerk, deputy state auditor. I had to do this years ago. And like I say, the language is right out of the Constitution of 1890. So if you don't have that on file with your city, make sure you get it on file with your city. The next thing is the official surety bond. This is the two-part Part two of the two things you have to do to be official to conduct your duties, is you have to have a surety bond on file. And the language of the surety bond comes out of Mississippi Code, and it says the bonds, individual officers give bond forthwith, and the bond's payable to state in a surety bond. So before you perform any official duties, you got to have an oath of office filed, and you have to have obtained a surety bond. Now, the city will pay the premium for the surety bond. But what's happened over the years is these surety companies have kind of wised up, and they've made it a lot harder for some people to get surety bonds. We've had some people who just can't get them at all. And there's legal ways you deal with that if that happens. I'm going to give you our contact information as we close, but those are the kind of questions that are good to call our office with. Hey, we got an alderman, we got a mayor, we can't get a surety bond, what do we do? Well, first of all, that person can't perform any duties yet because they don't have a bond. But we'll try to work with you and see if we can get them fixed up where they can get one. Especially if an individual's had a bankruptcy. The surety bond companies have gotten real strict about who they will sell coverage for, and they do like a financial check and all that stuff. Surety bonds is a fidelity bond. It's where the official promises to faithfully perform the duties of their office, and the surety agrees to pay for a loss arising due to a breach of that public official's promise. So if the official doesn't do what they're supposed to and there's a loss that occurs, that's where the surety bond steps in and pays for the loss. Now, I've had several people over the years tell me, well, I'm not worried because I got a surety bond. Well, guess what? The bond doesn't protect you, it protects the city from you. It's there to ensure the people in the city are made whole, not the official who was bonded. They cover failure to perform duties and violations of official obligations. What protection does a surety bond provide you? It's designed to protect the governing authority, meaning the city, from a failure of your faithful performance. However, if you do faithfully perform your duties and a loss still happens, the surety bond will look at that as defending you, will defend their bond as well, so they might pay to cover you. That's where you want to be. If there's an issue, you want the surety bond to defend you in court as they're defending their own bond. Yeah, you did everything you were supposed to. You're not the problem. Something else has caused the problem. And I've seen them do this before. So that's why it's really important. This is probably the most important thing I'll talk to y'all about today, is these surety bonds and making sure you understand what they are and what they're designed to do. Another way we described this one time is this. First of all, surety bonds are good forever. You may do something this year, it may be 20 years before it's discovered that it's a problem. That surety bond could still pay off on it in 20 years. They don't expire. Even though it's covering this term, problem comes up in 20 years, that surety bond's still in play. Therefore, you're still in play. I told this group one year, that surety bond is like a little black cloud that floats over you wherever you go in life. If you messed up and it comes up years later, because what's a surety bond going to do if they have to pay a claim because you messed up? They're going to come to you for the money. And I literally had an alderman go home and resign after he understood what surety bonds, how they work. Said it scared him to death. Well, we don't want it to scare you. We want you to be concerned about it. And we want you to primarily understand it. But it's a lot of liability that goes with these jobs and a lot of responsibility. And we want to help you do it right and protect yourself. When does a surety bond pay? Well, there's language in there that talks about if there's a breach of duties, a financial loss to the city. The official has to pay if you don't faithfully perform your duties and try to do things the right way, and the surety bond pays off, they're going to come to you for the money if they found that you haven't done what you're supposed to do. Official duties and faithful performance, we're going to talk about in a little more detail. The duties of the office and the meaning of the faithful performance, you've got to understand those. So know the duties of the office. That's what we're doing this week, isn't it? We're learning a lot of things about our office, how things work, identifying the legal duties of your office. You should also know and respect the duties of other officers, because there are other officers that have surety bonds, that have official duties. Police chief, city clerk, mayor, they have duties that are different than your duties if you're an alderman. They have to follow the same standard. They have to know the duties of their office to perform their jobs. You need to know a little bit about their offices to make sure you're not trying to do something that's really something they should be doing. And don't assume you know the duties. You know, the old thing about assuming things, we can be pretty sure we may know something, but we better double check and make sure. Understand the faithful performance responsibility. Faithful performance is defined as a level of accomplishment required of a public official in performance of their official duties. Accomplishment is measured in view of reasonable responsibility and effort. And we're going to talk about that. What does that mean? Well, reasonable responsibility and effort. You try. You've got evidence that you've tried to do things the right way, that you try to learn how things are supposed to work, that when you cast a vote on something, you understand what it is you're voting for. That's the primary thing for an alderman is, what am I voting for, and should I be voting for this? I want to make sure it's legal and that it's allowable to do and that it's what I intend to be doing. A little more about faithful performance. The general requirement is the action causing the breach is not one of discretionary nature, but is ministerial duty. So what does that mean, ministerial duty? If you're a constable and you've got papers to go arrest somebody from a court, and you go arrest them and they were innocent, they may try to sue you for false arrest, but you weren't deciding whether or not they need to be arrested. The court did that. You're just performing an order given to you by a court in that case. That's called a ministerial duty, when you don't have any discretion. There are not many things the Board of Aldermen does that are ministerial duties. One thing Tom Hood described is if you have a municipal separate school district and you're approving the budget for the school district or the tax levy, that's something that you don't have a lot of choice in, right? That's decided. You just have to vote for what they sent you. But generally, anything you vote for as an alderman, you're going to have discretion as to whether or not you do it. The strict requirement, strict liability, says that an individual who gets money by color of office is personally responsible for every dollar they get. That's not really aldermen. Aldermen typically don't handle money. City clerks do. City tax collectors do. And strict liability says that any money going into their office, they're personally responsible for till it goes to the right place it's supposed to go. Don't ever run for tax collector unless you want to stay up at night and worry about that, right? There's a dishonesty in public office requirement, which kind of speaks for itself. And another requirement is diversion of public funds from their legitimate purpose. So this is one as an alderman. Let's say you get money from a grant that's supposed to be spent on sidewalks, and you decide you'd rather spend it on playgrounds. That would be diversion of money from its purpose. Okay, so here's kind of a checklist type thing. Knowing your duties and avoiding responsibility. And I know I'm beating this to death, but it's worthy of being beaten to death. Familiarize yourself with the laws and the responsibilities of your position. State your position if you've got something you're concerned about voting for. Document your position in the board minutes. Check it out. You can read books. You can call people. You can call our office. We get lots and lots and lots of phone calls, thousands of them every year. That's what technical assistance is for, is to answer questions. If you're concerned about something that's come up as an item on the agenda to vote on, if you're concerned about it being legal or done properly or any of those things, you can call our office and talk to us about it. We'll tell you what we think. You can call the AG's office. You've got a board attorney. You can always call Tom Hood's office if you got any ethics or meeting related questions. Another thing you can do is you can check with the person that does do the city audit to see if they have any information about it. Have good internal control policies. Now, y'all not going to do a lot of setting of internal control policies. There's some things you will do. Because your city clerk is going to handle the money, basically, and city court clerk if you have one of them. One thing the board is going to be very involved in is policies with personnel, things of that nature. And this is one of the points of emphasis today, personnel policies. Under number D, under number 2 there, define the duties of employees, separate employee duties that create theft opportunities. That's really more for the clerk to deal with. But you better be really careful about defining the duties of employees. This is something the board needs to be involved in. People will turn, if you don't clearly, an employer too, with 200 something employees under me before. If you don't strictly define what people are supposed to be doing when they're working for you, their job will turn into what they want to do, not what you need them to do. So it's very important to define their duties. Going on down the list here, the next thing was computer security. And I'm pointing these out, not that y'all need to get deep in the weeds on that, but y'all need to be aware. Some computer person will probably need to guide you in helping do policies for things like that. Surety bonds for employees. The law says which employees are required to have surety bonds. Any employees handling money in a city, I believe, are required to have surety bonds. Y'all can always bond more people if you choose to than are required to be. There's provisions where you can buy errors and omissions coverage, liability insurance. One of the things under G it points out, and this comes up pretty often, believe it or not, boards and council members should vote decisively. Your vote should be plainly, like Tom Hood said, be plainly recorded in the minutes. If you are opposed to a motion, vote no. If you abstain, you're considered as voting with the majority. So if there's a 3-1 vote and you abstain, if there's 5 aldermen, it passes 3-1 and you vote to abstain, you're counted as the 4 that voted for it. So if it's illegal, when it comes time to ask people to pay money back, even if you abstain, you're one of the ones that get to help pay money back. Now, how do I avoid that? You either vote no or you're not present, meaning you've left the room and the minutes show you're not in the room. Otherwise, you're voting with the majority. And here's where you really do come into play as aldermen and mayors. Adopt policies that are necessary to direct your authority to ensure that you have the information necessary to make legal decisions. 1, board meeting procedures. Y'all should be adopting these if you don't have any. How the motions are made, how the votes are taken, can the public speak, what's recorded in the minutes, who approves the minutes, etc. 2, purchasing and contracting procedures. Who can initiate a contract or purchase? How's the purchase order documented? Who can declare emergencies? So that's the question to think of in your city. If somebody needs to buy something, who has to authorize them to buy it? Does every purchase have to go through the board where they come to the board and say, we want permission to buy something? Or have y'all delegated that to department heads, for example, subject to their budget? That's something, there's no right or wrong way to do it. I'm just saying that's something y'all need to have written policies and procedures to explain. Number 3, employee personnel policies. Maybe the biggest thing here for you to take away today, one of them. I've seen this happen 1,000 times. You have an employee that retires and they say, well, you owe me for 1,000 hours of comp time. Well, wait a minute. We didn't know we owed you for any comp time. Well, the first thing that's going to happen is they're going to go back to your written policies and procedures and see what the rules are about comp time and retirement and so forth. And guess what happens if you don't have any written policies and procedures? That employee is going to go to wage and hour and make a claim against you that you're violating his rights because he had comp time and you're refusing to pay it. Generally, you don't find out about these issues until it's a problem with things like leave and so forth. And it's always a mess. How are employees hired and fired? That's another one. Who has authority to do that? Well, in a code charter, we know that really that authority rests with the board. Mayors can suspend with pay in a code charter, but they can't hire and fire. But do you delegate to your department heads the ability to hire people and terminate them with your approval coming at the next meeting? That's something your policies need to say. Let me tell you something. I know this firsthand. When the EEOC folks show up at your door, you may have done everything perfectly right and legal, but you lost. You have just lost because you have a battle to deal with that takes a lot of time and expense and trouble to get through. And if you lose, then on top of that, you get to write a big check to somebody. So the clearer and plainer you have all these rules and policies spread out on your minutes for everybody to understand, the better. And when you give employees personnel policies, do like we do. We make a written copy of them. We make the employee sign that he got a written copy of them and the date. And so they can never come back to you and say, you never showed me that, or you never told me that. I've got you on record that you had these policies and the date. If you haven't done it before, do it when you get home. Claim verification procedures, number 4. You need policies about how claims are verified before they're presented to you for payment. Because if you pay a claim, if you vote to pay a claim for something that was purchased and never received, you're on the hook for it. So you better have a process out there where somebody verifies that it was received to demonstrate to the board proof that, yeah, we ordered this car, we got the car, here's who signed for it, here's where it is, and you're comfortable that you received the things you're voting to pay for. Budget procedures, same things. Rules about how budgets are prepared, what department heads' involvement is with that, and so forth. And then new laws and obligations. Somebody needs to be watching for changes in the law, which happen every year, and other type changes that can affect your city financially. That's a lot of stuff about duties and liability and faithful performance, but that's kind of the meat of why we're here. How to know when expenditures are legal. First of all, an expenditure to be legal, you go first to the function of government. Cities are different than counties in that with counties collect road and bridge tax, and they have to spend that money on roads and bridges. Cities generally collect money in the general fund, and the board decides where to spend the money. There are some laws that are restricted, like if you get a grant for sidewalks, you got to make sure it's spent on sidewalks, right? Cities are a little bit easier than counties in that regard. Sometimes we have revenue laws. In other words, start with where the money comes from. So we issue bonds to build a new city hall. The proceeds of the bond issue can only be spent on the new city hall and associated cost. That's kind of a revenue law. The source of the funds, the rules with it tell us where we can spend the money. There are some expenditure laws. One of the code sections says city has authority and power to exercise jurisdiction over streets, sidewalks, sewers, and parks. The law doesn't mention all the things that involves, though. It says work on streets. Well, does that mean hiring people? Does that mean buying equipment? Does that mean buying supplies? Yes, it can. Not as specific. And then procedure laws, and we talk primarily with those to your claim approval process and purchase laws. Records, if there's concern about the appearance of a purchase, you need to document it in the records. We've looked at this and we know it's a little unusual, but we're still going to approve it because we think it's good to go. The more documentation you put in there about it, the better. Because let me tell you what happens. You go home next month, it'll be August of 2025. You'll vote to pay something. And sometime in 2026, the audit firm is going to come look at it. And sometime maybe in early 2027, they're going to say, now, why did y'all do this again? What was y'all's thought process? And I promise you, if you're like me, you're not going to remember it probably. But if you document it now, when you do it, it'll be there to show them later and cause less problems. For example, these are some pretty good examples. You can buy microwaves, refrigerators, because if you're furnishing a break room, that's the appropriate thing to furnish a break room with. You wouldn't normally just go buy appliances with city money. People would go, what are they doing that for? That mayor's getting a new dishwasher, or that mayor's getting a new refrigerator, right? Well, you can buy things like that if it's for a legal city purpose. Bottled water, Gatorade. You got a road crew out there, you better be buying them Gatorade right now, right? They're going to fall out in this heat. Things that ordinarily might look strange to people, again, could be a good city purpose for. Here's what really gets us in trouble. Donations. How to tell when donations can be made. There's 3 constitutional sections that deal with donations. When it's in the Mississippi Constitution, the law cannot supersede it unless it's a law that's been approved by 2/3 of the legislature. The 3 sections are Section 66, which is a donation without specific authority. Section 96, which means you paid somebody in salary or so forth more than you owe them. And then Section 100 is in here as well, and that prohibits a release of obligations. We get this question a lot. So this guy owed us $100. He moved out of state. We don't think we're ever going to see him again. Can we take him off the books? Well, you can never forgive an obligation owed to the state or city unless it's paid. That's an example of it right there. Doesn't mean we have to show it in our accounts receivable as active, but because some debts are never going to be paid, but you can't release the obligation. You can't pay by more than their salary they've agreed to. And 66, the primary one means you can't just give stuff to people. Another way to think about that one is you can't pay somebody something you don't owe them, because there has to be something to create an obligation for you to give them money. And there's some exceptions, and I'm going to walk you through some of those. But those 3 will get you in trouble every time. Home rule, which cities have, does not supersede the Constitution. Here we go, some examples of donation authorities, and it's got the little code sections next to them. School program and building support. Counties and cities can loan equipment to each other. So if you loan a county a piece of your equipment, you're not making a donation to them. There's authority for it. You can support the arts, you can support city libraries, you can support planning and development districts, you can support domestic violence shelters, and there's various other ones there's about 20 code sections that list them separately: bands, fairs, Red Cross, Boys and Girls Clubs, and several other ones. There's specific little laws for each of them in there. So if you're giving money to the Red Cross, there is specific authority in the law for you to do that. Therefore, it's not a donation. Make sure and call our folks though, because some of those laws that allow those donations say limited to $1,000 or limited to $500 or something like that. So you want to make sure if you're allowed to donate to a group that you don't give them more than you're allowed to. And usually in-kind services can be used in lieu of donating money. So if you're doing something for the Boys and Girls Club, if you're allowed to give them $1,000, you can do $1,000 worth of work on a parking lot or whatever it is they need in lieu of giving them a check. Here's two things y'all deal with all the time, and this is why they're not donations. You're not allowed to donate money to a volunteer fire department. You are, however, allowed to contract with the volunteer fire department for fire services. And I bet you most of y'all in here have volunteer fire departments that you deal with, if not, a good many of you. So what happens is, the fire marshal's office, they have that municipal fire fund where monies go to cities to help pay for things for fire departments, and it can be for volunteer fire departments. The city has to have a contract with their volunteer fire departments that serve the city, and in the contract it spells out what the fire department's going to do to earn the money the city gives them, pays them, not donates to them. They can be private. A lot of these things are private nonprofits. Sometimes they're private nonprofits that use a city-owned building for a fire station, and maybe even city-owned equipment. But there's a contract. If there's not, make sure there is. There's a contract in place allowing that to happen, allowing you to spend money on them, and therefore it's not a donation. But if you're just giving money to a volunteer fire department with no contract, that's not legal. This is one that, it's not too widespread of a problem anymore. It used to be, but we got real active with it, trying to get it kind of caught up. So make sure, do this for me. When you get home, if you've got volunteer fire department contracts, another thing that happens is the contracts expire and people don't really think about renewing them. And we may pull a contract in your city and it may have expired in 2020. Nobody thought to renew it. So go ahead now and renew them if there's outstanding expired volunteer fire department contracts, and that should, take care of the problem. Another similar thing is recreational associations. We've got a ball field, but we don't really have a Parks and Rec department, and a group wants to use our ball fields to run baseball program and do Little League and things like that. That's fine. They can be a nonprofit corporation, but they need to have a contract with the city that says what you're going to do for them and what they're going to do for the city. They're going to run a Little League program or whatever that may be. It should also spell out things like liability insurance, because people get hurt all the time at baseball games, don't they? Players and parents. It should spell out all those kind of issues that can arise having those kind of activities. And like I say, it's not a donation then when you spend money on it. Some expenditures appear to be donations. And here's another one that's a biggie. Work on private property. There's people in this world who live for nothing more than to come to your office and tell you what a bad job you're doing, and everybody in this city's crooked. Am I hitting a nerve? And okay, so one thing that will cause this 10 times out of 10 is if I've got a piece of city equipment up on somebody's yard doing something on private property. Now obviously you can do whatever you need to on public property, but there's times we have to get on private property to benefit the city. What if that person's got a creek running through their yard, and when that creek backs up and floods, it floods a city street, and the problem place is on private property? Well, with the owner's permission, we'll get on that private property and fix it where that creek won't flood our street anymore. Or what if I've got a big tree hanging over out of my yard over a city street, and it's keeping people from being able to see what they need to see driving through there, if at a corner or whatever? The city can, with the owner's permission, come on that private property, cut that tree back to improve visibility. They're doing it for a city purpose in both cases. They're not doing it to help that private property owner. They're doing it for a city purpose. Now, it may be that doing that helps the private property owner too, That's what we would call an incidental benefit. You may be helping the property owner, but that's not why we're doing this. We're doing this for the city's purposes. But it will sure make the phone ring, won't it? Emergency authority. We could teach a whole half-a-day class about emergencies and how to correspond to relate to them. Were any of y'all in government in 2005? We were supposed to have MML in 2005. I believe it was first year of a term. And MML got postponed because there was a tropical storm in the Gulf, and they moved it back 2 weeks, and it was supposed to start August 29th of 2005. Now, August 29th of 2005 was the day Katrina hit. Obviously, we didn't do MML that week either. We really kind of never had MML that year, and it was the first year of a term. But boy, did we learn about emergencies and things you can do and not do and how to handle them. So, on the state auditor's website, the reference now is on the last page of this, there is an emergency accountability guide for local officials, and it's got a lot of information about emergencies and what you can do to deal with them, declaring emergencies, spending money in emergencies, budgeting things that were in emergencies, dealing with FEMA, a lot of things in there. And it's way too much stuff to cover right now, much less in a half a day almost. But I will just tell you there's policies and procedures that you're allowed to do in an emergency. And an emergency like a tornado that maybe only affects your town, we deal with those more frequently than these large scale things. But anytime you call us and we will help you, especially with emergency stuff, there's lots of things we know that would help you to know if you're dealing with an emergency. And hopefully we don't have another Katrina. I'll tell you, the day after Katrina, a couple days after, I answered the phone and it was the city clerk from Waveland. Y'all know anything about Waveland and Katrina? Waveland was gone after Katrina. She said, I've got a copy of the city records in my car. I'm driving to Jackson to my mother's house. We can't find anybody with the city right now. Nobody knows how to get in touch with anybody. Now that's a problem, right? That's overwhelming. Most emergencies we deal with, thank goodness, are not of that scale. Usually it's a flood, tornado. An emergency might be your city hall roof leaking after a storm and damaging things. It could be a smaller thing like that. So always, please feel free to call us and let us help you when you deal with these situations. How to tell when property and service transfers are donations. These just go through some different laws that talk about other type donations are legal. Private appropriations, those are generally called local and private laws. And that's where the legislature passes a law that says the city of Biloxi can do the following. And it'll list some group they can give money to or action they can take or whatever. And the law will only apply to one city. Governmental allows sales of things between governmental entities at less than market value. So you can always buy from a city, another city, a county, the state, equipment and so forth, buy or sell to them for less than market value, and that's not considered a donation. Firearm sale to a retiring officer, there's a law that allows a firearm sale to a retiring police officer. It's at the rate decided by the council, alderman, so it could be nothing or $1 or whatever. That's not considered a donation. Service contracts, we talked about fire departments and recreational associations. Sale of surplus and junk property. There's a procedure in 1725-25 that talks about how you can get rid of surplus and junk property. This law happened because I was walking down the hall of the Capitol and one of the representatives grabbed me on the arm and said, "Go with me, I'm writing a law right now." So we sat down and came up with this thing. So I always tell people, if you really like it, you're welcome. If you hate it, Representative Tommy Reynolds wrote it. Just briefly, and I'm not going to spend any real time on this, the auditor has investigative duties, so even though we don't audit cities, we can investigate them, and we have many, many times. The auditor's investigators are licensed, certified law enforcement officers, carry firearms, all that stuff. They'll investigate a situation, and they're looking for loss to the public, generally, theft or whatever it is. They'll go to a DA or AG office or U.S. attorney to prosecute. The auditor's office does not have authority to prosecute. The one thing the auditor's office can do is issue a formal demand letter for repayment of funds. This is pretty common that if they come in and they say, well, y'all voted to buy something and you paid more than by law you should have for it, therefore, Board of Aldermen, you owe the difference. And here's a formal demand letter. And then if you didn't pay the money back, it would go to court, to Chancery Court. That's another power the auditor has that we'd rather not see used, because we're all going to go home and we're going to have our policies and procedures, and we're going to make sure everything we vote for is legal and proper, right? So we're not going to run into issues like that. Shad White, by the way, is your current state auditor. Shad is not here this week. He's away with the U.S. Army Reserve, but he'll be back shortly. Two more things. There is a thing called the Municipal Compliance Questionnaire. It's got about 100 questions. It covers everything to do with the city financial operations, budgeting, paying claims, and so forth. I did not attach it to this PowerPoint. What I put on this PowerPoint was how to get to it. And if you want to go to our website, you can download it. If you're an alderman or mayor, it's a pretty good checklist, because it'll say things like, does each person have a surety bond? You know, do you get this monthly report from the clerk? All kinds of specifics like that. You can use it like a checklist to go through and say, well, yeah, we do this, but we don't do that. This will tell you how to get to it. And here's our contact information. And I will just leave that up there for y'all. The 800 number's 1-800-321-1275. Like I say, technical assistance gets 9,000 or 10,000 calls a year. There's 3 CPAs working up there full-time, equivalent, I'll say. There's 2 or 3 attorneys. One of them's a CPA and an attorney, so it's kind of hard to count. But they've got people that either can get you the answer, or they can get you to the answer if they don't know it themselves. I'm retired. I work part-time with them. I'm there some, but there's full-time folks there. Somebody will call you back. If they're not available right then, they're going to call you back the same day if you call that 800 number. That's really important to them, to get responses back to people. You can also write them letters. You can email them. If you email them a question, they're going to email you the answer back. If you write them a letter, they're going to write you a letter back. Just whatever form you want to ask it in. We understand that a lot of times we're used to kind of settle arguments. So people will want a letter from us with the answers. They can wave it around and show the other people, and that's fine. We don't hate on anybody. We just try to help. And with that, I think we're through. No test today. Thank y'all very much.